if you're a Muslim woman and you're struggling or just want to know if you should get into entrepreneurship, I would say do it, because your background is your strength. You know, there are things that you can see that other people can't see, and there are experiences that you have that will make you the best person to tackle whatever it is you want to do, whether it's starting a modest clothing line or it's providing culturally appropriate care like I am. Diversity is a strength, despite the climate that we're going through right now. It is your strength. I studied global health and social medicine at university. I'm very passionate about global health and all things to do with health and health inequalities and just addressing them in general. And I founded a business called Care Algo, and it's all about, I guess, providing people with culturally appropriate care so that they can age with dignity, inshallah. So I created it from scratch, and actually I had that idea a couple of years ago when I was in my final year of university. I studied global health and social medicine, and in my final year I did a module on the aging population, so I became really interested in social care and just how they're very slow to innovation and all the different issues around that. On top of that, I grew up in Tower Hamlets, and my mum actually worked as a care worker at the time, and I would always hear her on the phone, and her agency would always ask her questions like, do you speak this language? Do you know how to do this? Do you know this? And I thought, you know, this is happening all the time, every week. And I thought, do they not have a database where they know what language you speak, what your religious background is, and what you can do for people that you care for? And then I decided to just call up all the agencies in Tower Hamlets at the time, and I asked them all the same question: do people ever request culturally appropriate care? And they all said yes, all the time. And I said, okay, how do you deal with it? And what I'm about to explain is a real case study. And one person that I spoke to said, okay, well, I had a woman call me up and she asked for an Indian care worker who can cook vegetarian Indian food. And I said, okay, how did you cater to her needs? He said, well, I went down an Excel spreadsheet and I looked for a carer with an Indian sounding name. I just thought, even India has so many different religions, languages. And I said, even if you could find somebody that can speak Hindi, how do you cater to her other needs? And I guess I just became really intrigued by how we can use technology to tackle those issues that I've encountered through my education and personal lived experience. I think it was kind of difficult for me because my mum worked as a carer, and for her she enjoyed her job, but it was a job. And I think my degree was very much focused on the top level, I guess, like policy more so. So it wasn't very entrepreneurial, but in my final year of university, I actually did a little course at university, and it was an entrepreneurship course, just to kind of understand that. And I did a lot of accelerator programs after I graduated. I've done quite a lot of them. And most recently, I just completed one called London Health Accelerator, which has been incredible in helping me understand procurement and getting my foot in the door. But it was a lot of it was self-taught and networking. So I go to a lot of care conferences, and I actually get invited to speak at a lot of these conferences as well. So I was able to network and kind of just build everything from scratch. And everything was kind of just, you know, learning to write grant applications to be able to get the funding to develop my technology, or, you know, developing my training materials and having my CPD accreditation, and all of that was all just lived, you know, my own learned experience and just what I learned at the accelerator programs that I attended. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of room for technology within healthcare, specifically within social care, which is even far more behind than in the NHS itself. And I feel like when I started out 7 years ago, care planning software companies weren't even a big thing at the time. So a lot of the times when my mum was a carer, she was using paper-based timesheets and payslips and things like that. Whereas now it's becoming more common. And I feel like one of the struggles that I had in the recent years when I was developing my technology is that, you know, the care sector was very slow to innovation. So they were not really open to using my technology, but they were more open to in-person training, for example. So they would say, yeah, we do need more culturally appropriate care. Could you provide training instead to our carers, rather than just having this technology, which would make your life so much easier than using Excel spreadsheet. So it's a constant struggle, but I feel like now we're starting to see some improvements in incorporating tech within adult social care. So with our technology, we have an app and we have a web portal. So we have three different stakeholders that use our technology. The first are the care workers and the care seekers. So we have our app on the App Store and the Google Play Store, and the care seekers and the care workers would actually download the app and they would, you know, fill in their information. So with the care workers, it will be things like their skills, their experiences, their qualifications. what languages can you speak, what religions do you understand, and then we would also get them to study a little bit. So there's some information on the app around different religions, for example. So it could be Islam, and it would be things like, if somebody is fasting during Ramadan and they have an illness, would you encourage them to fast, or would you let them know that they are exempt from fasting and they can have their medication instead? How would you care for somebody in that scenario? So it's very scenario based, and they would have to then take a quiz, and if they get 80%, they become qualified to take care of somebody from those religions or those different backgrounds. And that information then goes onto a web portal that agencies have. And this web portal has a list of the care workers, a list of the care seekers, and all that information. So with the care worker profile, it might show that the religions that they're qualified for, the hair type that they can deal with. Can you deal with Afro hair, for example? Because not everyone can deal with that in the care sector. So there's just a lot of mismatching, and it kind of improves that. And also we use AI in the way that our AI works within the web portal is that, if the care seekers request care, so if I'm saying I want 2 hours of care for somebody that speaks Somali, can cook Somali food, and understands Islam and can cater to my Islamic needs, like help me do wudu and things like that, it will show a list of carers that are the best match for me. So I'll say 80% match with this person who can do this and that, and 10% match with this person, and then you can choose the person that has the higher match. And that's how we kind of use AI to match people appropriately. Right now, there's so much mismatch. So the average care seeker won't just have one carer in their lifetime. They'll have multiple, because the person that they have the first time around, they might not even communicate this in the same language, and it becomes really difficult. And one thing that is really interesting is that when someone develops dementia, they lose their English language skills. And even if they spoke English fluently for the last 40 years, if they get dementia, they'll revert back to their native language. And it will be difficult to find somebody that can communicate with them in their native language. So there's always that kind of mismatch and understanding how to care for somebody with those needs. I would say, from my experience, no. Yes and no. So some care providers do generate a lot of profit because they charge the carers a lot to stay in their homes, for example. But when it actually does come to spending, they aren't, so it depends. They're not really that open to it. So I've spoken to a lot of carers in the past where I would try and sell my services and they just say, oh, we don't really have the money for that. But I feel like there's a few big players that monopolize the market, and they're the ones that can really afford things like this, the larger players. And I feel like there's loads of little agencies that can't really afford a lot. So let's just talk about Tower Hamlets, for example, which is the borough that I'm from. So the local authority commissioned some agencies, for example, and they only commission about 7 or 8 agencies at a time, and they give most of the contracts to those 7 or 8 agencies, and they get paid hundreds of thousands each to deliver care. But there'll be multiple other agencies within Tower Hamlets or care providers within Tower Hamlets that don't really see even a fraction of what those large agencies do. So I think they could afford it, but the little ones might not necessarily afford it. And I feel like it's almost unfair that most of the resources go to a few select carers, and they're kind of monopolizing most of the sector. And that's kind of how I see it. There was a few years ago, I was actually speaking to the largest care provider within the UK. So they have 200 branches across the UK. And normally when I've had conversations with care agencies, and I've worked with loads of kind of large organizations in the past, like CQC and Skills for Care, and I've spoken at conferences. So I have some form of expertise within this kind of area. And yeah, so I met up with this large agency, 200 branches across the UK, and he was very senior level, the man that I spoke to, and he was a white man, and he comes from a very predominantly white area. So I was kind of just explaining the app to him, and we were having a meeting. And one of the things he said to me was, it felt like almost, because I'm maybe younger, I was younger back then, and I was a woman, and I'm also Muslim, and I'm black, and I have all of these intersectionalities. It felt like he was almost patronizing me. It was strange. He was saying things along the lines of, what can you do to tackle this sector? And he was like, oh, it's not an issue, because he comes from a predominantly white area and he doesn't see the need for it. Whereas I come from somewhere like Tower Hamlets where I see the need for it. So I guess it's been difficult in that regard. When people who aren't from the same similar backgrounds to us or diverse backgrounds don't understand the need. But when you are in a diverse area like London or Birmingham, even, white people that come from that sector understand the need for it. But outside of that, it felt that was kind of a difficult moment for me, because I just thought, I know from my background, my background is my strength. The fact that I am Muslim or that I am black or that I come from Tower Hamlets is a strength, because I was able to spot an issue that most people were not able to spot. And because of that, I was able to influence national policy around culturally appropriate care within the UK. So I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have my background. So I guess it is difficult, but it's also a blessing. I always say my background is a blessing in what I do. I think it's because there's a need for this, and no one else is currently focusing on this area. It's becoming something that's people are getting into more of a conversation with now, But when I was doing this 7 years ago, there was literally no conversation around culturally appropriate care. It was very much person-centered care, which is a form of culturally appropriate care, but we are missing the bigger picture. You know, people's religions are really important to them, and it will become even more important as they reach the end of their life. So it's kind of, I just want to make sure that everyone has access to culturally appropriate care, and we have that social impact, and local authorities are, you know, delivering the training around culturally appropriate care, or using our tech to match people appropriately, so that we don't have this constant mismatching, and, you know, families aren't going through a lot of, you know, headache having to do, you know, arrange care for their family members, and people that are aging should age with dignity and with people that can communicate with them well and to serve them well. So currently it's me, myself and then I also have a CTO who just kind of takes care of all the app side of things and the technology side of things, which is amazing because it allows me to kind of focus more on actually just, I guess, the working with the clients and working with the people on the ground and delivering some of the training sessions myself as well. So that's been amazing to be able to do that. To grow out my team, hopefully, you know, I do have a pilot coming up with a local authority, which I'm really excited about. So I'm hoping that we get commissioned by that local authority so that we can provide care and training to all the care providers within their borough, and just kind of go from there and just work with as many local authorities as possible across the UK, not just in London, but in all the diversities across the UK, and just, yeah, grow out our team and make sure that everyone has access to culturally appropriate care in some form.